He leads the operational risk, compliance, and few other risk functions for for Wells Fargo. More than 18 years of experience in this space. He's worked with Wells Fargo, currently working with it, Citibank, ICICI, and HSBC. He's a certified anti-money laundering specialist and has a diploma in investment compliance from the UK. So he will be conducting the session with the other panelists, and I'll probably pass on the privilege of introducing other panelists as well.
Okay, interesting conversation so far. Thank you very much, previous panel members in the conceptual presentation. So we heard Rajesh speak earlier about, in the previous panel discussion, about the local law of land requirement. And then Rajesh, you mentioned some 2,200 regulations just spanning the length of the country between Jammu and Kashmir and India. For the next 40 minutes, we're talking global. I don't know if we'll have 25,000 regulations out there, but we will get some interesting perspective. I'd like to introduce the panel members. Prashant, thank you for staying back, and being a common member. I would like to invite Vic Bose. Vic Bose is the global head of AML compliance operations at HSBC. He has over 25 years of experience, including his current 17-year stint at HSBC. I've known him for 10 years now. He's been on the business side, and now he's on the risk side. So I'm sure we're going to get some very interesting perspective from him. He's done various global leadership roles and has worked out of India, UK, and Malaysia during his tenure. Would also like to invite Shubharan Mukherjee. Shubharan is the Director of Industry Marketing Metrics team, sorry. Yeah. He's an ISB grad with over a decade of executive experience in technology, domain across multiple functions like product marketing, field marketing, consultative sales, product strategy, and then it goes on. It's a lot of them really. And he's done a lot of work with mid-sized startups, and he has some global companies as well that he's supporting. He has worked with leading organizations before metrics team with Deloitte, SAP, SAP, as they would like to be called, Wipro, and ITC. Various phases of organizational growth story, and serve global clients and prospects, especially in the banking and financial sector. Thank you very much, panel, for being here. So, before I take my own seat, I just want to give a little bit of view that I see. I think the cost and effort that we are putting in terms of managing risk in today's global organization has become almost prohibitive in a way. Whatever efficiencies that we are building within our organizations is all going towards managing risk. We're really not making better profits. Okay. It also influences the ability of organizations to be a little more adventurous. It's influenced their ability to get to new markets, go and try new products. They're very cautious about it. I know some organizations who are very happy being in their own base country because they really don't know what kind of regulatory requirements are out there from a global standpoint. So it's inhibiting their adventurousness or even expansion for that matter. Compared to pre-financial crisis time to now, a number of organizations are spending more than 60%, but they're seeing a 60% increase in the spend just on risk and compliance side. So that's a significant piece of amount of expense that's going towards just managing. And from the previous panel we heard that, let's be more careful. It's not a 500 rupee fine anymore. Fines are running into billions of dollars. We've heard enough case studies out there. There are companies which are paid upwards of $6 billion for certain transgressions. So it's important that we are proactive. It's important that we manage risk and compliance. It's important we get predictive. It's important that we're really on the top of the requirement to ensure we don't have to pay that fine. Fine is again, you can put a dollar value to it. But then the problem is really what happens as a result of the incident. There are things that you cannot put a dollar value. The reputational risk that comes along with it. The customer confidence loss that comes along with it. You can't put a dollar value to this. So it's not just about those billions of dollars, it's about things that you can't put an effort to. So we will hear it from the panel and make sure we get some good insights. So over to the panel, and let me time myself as well. I think we're running a little behind schedule, but we'll see if we can make up on that. And I will. Okay. So the first point that I would like to talk to the panel about is understanding the complexities that we have around global regulations. Right? This is a big thing. I'm not going to ask you to do the talk about 22,000 or 25,000 regulations for sure. But from a client side, Vic, I would like to start with you. What is your perspective? How are the regulations evolving? And what kind of view you have around this complex world out there?
Thanks for that. Right. No, you're absolutely right. It is, as you can see, if in one particular market within the regions there is so much complexity, you can just multiply it by, we are in 70 odd markets, so try and multiply it by 70 times, so you kind of try to get close to that scale. But more importantly, what's also happening is we are, and in fact, in HSBC we have started taking a longer term view. I am involved in a program which is looking at where do we think our bank would land in 2030. So we're taking a longer term 2030 horizon view. And we've done a lot of study in terms of risk and regulations, where are we headed to it. And there are certain themes which are emerging. One of them is obviously you are beginning to see clustering of regulations within regions. However, even within that region, one or two or three markets will play a dominant part. So if you look at Europe, UK plays a dominant part. If you look at Asia, Singapore and Hong Kong play the dominant part in terms of driving what the regulations are going to be. I'm sorry, I should have clarified. I'm going to talk purely from the financial institution background because that's what I do. So there is, of course, a world outside of that also. I recognize that. And so there is that clustering which is happening. Interestingly, we are not only talking about financial regulations, which is purely focusing on the infrastructure, but we are also talking about financial regulations which are forcing the banks to become more resilient and actually demonstrate it. So whether that's having more capital to support the risk ratios, etc., or whether that's pure investment in, like we saw Axis Bank partnering with Jakarta, sorry, to drive a better financial crime control regime or anti-money laundering regime. I think that's one of the key focus. We also discovered two interesting things which are linked, but you wouldn't necessarily see it as a part of financial regulation, and that's about labor regulations. The labor regulations are evolving quite rapidly across the globe, and one thing which is emerging is slowly the lines between a contracted worker, a permanent employee, an offshore or outsourced employee, they are beginning to blur. Yeah. Now whether you look at it as your responsibility of managing third-party vendors or whether it's just a pure extension of employment contract, those are beginning to blur. And linked to that is that the HR domain has to evolve quite quickly in order to be able to provide a lot more granular information in terms of are they complying or not complying. So that's the labor part. Obviously, all of you are now very familiar with the visa regulations and changes around US, and that will have its own implications. But immigration is actually an interesting trend, and it continues to be along the lines that developed markets will start putting up barriers and they will only allow very discrete skill sets to be migrated, whilst the developing ones will actually allow you more tax exemptions to get these skill sets in. So it kind of works both ways. The third point which I want to make is data. data, we all know how important it is, starts with data, ends with data. However, how we use the data, the regulations around those are becoming quite prescriptive. How you use the data, where you store the data, how you can use the data, how you can transfer it, those are becoming quite prescriptive. And what is also happening is that the customers are being given a lot more rights around their data, and which leads to scenarios that the financial institutions could be fined real big numbers. Now you're talking about 2 to 4% of your profit before tax. That could be the size of the fine if you do not demonstrate that you're managing customer data seriously and you've got all the controls around it. So usage of data, where it resides, etc., is very important. And if you look at the triangulation of these three things, multiply it across multiple markets, and everybody has a different flavor of what they need, what the expectations are, what the thresholds are. That makes a very, very complex picture for any international institution to manage, whether it's financial institution or somebody else. So that's the general picture that I thought I'll just lay on the table.
Thank you, Vic. And before we get to Subaran and just one more thought. Do you think we need better compliance with existing regulations or more regulations to comply with? Just want to pick your ideas on that.
There's no right or wrong answer to this, right? It's a catch-22. Which one do you say yes or no? I think starting with being able to comply with the existing regulations, that could be a big step. But I go back to the point someone was mentioning earlier. I think it started with a week and we evolved from there. I think we need to start to go back to the fact that we are managing the risk. If you manage risk well, then you automatically comply. So managing to risk or managing to compliance, not always necessarily the same thing. Yeah. So focus on managing risk, then you automatically start to comply. And that's my view.
Thank you. Really like that response. So getting to metric stream, we followed the conversation that Vic said. There are three different components. Triangulate, look at the number of, if you look at really the spectrum, the width and the kind of regulations that are out there, how can you help as a user? He gave his views. As a service provider or a tools person, metrics has a number of tools, right, which help us be more compliant with governance, risk and compliance requirements. So your thoughts, please. I mean, how do we manage the wide spectrum?
I'll probably take a step back and not stand here market my product. So probably taking a step back to what Vic was saying, add to the fact that there is a large amount of complexity. There is a large amount of dynamism as well in the environment. So if you look at regulators globally, there is not only the fact that the number of regulations, the number of requirements, the mandates that you have to follow keeps increasing. What also keeps increasing is the fact that these keep changing with the regimes. We're seeing a lot of that happening in the US right now. Brexit would follow and so on and so forth. And that change in itself is something which is critical. And I was just talking to Vic on a personal note previously. We're doing some work with their organization on as well on that particular aspect. So if you look at it, primarily it is that change, that the change in itself would be permanent as we go ahead, right? And going back to that question which was asked about risk and compliance, well, somewhere they are the same sides of the coin, the different sides of the same coin, and you can take multiple aspects to solve the problem, but at the end of the day, it's the same coin that you're dealing with. And where we kind of believe that the real influence would come as far as compliance programs are concerned is in the pervasiveness of the program itself. The involvement of more and more, and lots of speakers before us have talked about it as well, the involvement of more and more of the business is as critical or more important at least in my opinion, in terms of whether you want to solve the risk problem to solve the compliance problem or the compliance problem to solve the risk problem. And that brings me to the point which Pete was talking about, his last point in terms of data itself, right? The sources of data are wide. We are in a generation where, we have, our standard user has the attention span of lesser than a goldfish, right? And in that particular perspective, you have to understand that a lot of this data that we're talking about is influenced by our consumer behavior as well. And that in turn affects the whole risk space as well as compliance space. And if you look at regulators today, and there's some work which we are doing with one of the so-called emerging economy regulators who are not supposed to be thought leaders as compared to the developed economies, where they're actually basing their regulatory actions depending on the data that they're collecting. They're looking at the whole portfolio of loss data, which almost 190 regulated entities are submitting to them. And they're looking at that data and seeing what kind of scenarios they would run with which cluster of banks. And that's the kind of approach which you see at the regulator level as well, right? And